We're now on Daf Tes Amud Aleph, and we had a Mishnah yesterday from Masechet Yevamot, and we'll go over just very quickly that Mishnah. The Mishnah says that when you have a mitzvah, or we'll say a losaseh, in the Torah, and if you violate that losaseh, the mezid yechayiv kares, the shogeg, you have to bring a chatas. And a yachid will bring a kizba or a seira, or a carbon chatas, a carbon shkaga. A nasi will bring for his shkaga a sa'ir. A kohen gadol will bring, together with the same din that applies if there was a mistake in the hora, in Bezdin, and that's called a par. And if it was an avodah zarah case, then the yachid, the nasi, the kohen gadol, the kohen mashiach would bring a seira as a chatas. Now, if the tzibur worships avodah zarah based on a hora as Bezdin, a mistaken hora, then they bring a par v'soyer, two karbonos. The par is liola, the soyer is lechatas. And the Gemara had asked, what is the source from which we derive this conclusion that a chatas is brought only if there's a chiyuv kares in a mezid situation? And we're going to derive it from a gzeirah of oleha oleha. In the parsha of chatas, it says asher chatu oleha. And in the parsha of chatas at tzibur, and in the parsha of erva, it says oleh lo sikach litzar legalos erva ervasa oleh b'chayev. And we're going to derive the conclusion that just like in the parsha of Arayos, Yechayev v'zadon kare, so too in the parsha of chatas, you're chayev if it's a zadon kares. So what we're up to now is Ashkechan. Let's see if we all have the place. Which, how many lines down would this be? Let's say the first word in the line is chatos. Would it be about 14 lines down from the bottom, and from the top, excuse me? I'm not sure if it's 14, I didn't count it. Ashkechan, so we derive from this Gzeirah Shav Lel Lel, Tzibur. What does that mean, Tzibur? That there's a halacha requirement of a par helik dovashal tzibur, and the tzibur will bring its par only if it was this dono kare situation, because we derive it from the case, the pasuk that says v'noda'a hachatos asher chata oleha, and that's referring to the par helik dovashal tzibur in the 4th chapter of Vayikra. However, Mashiach minolam, how do you know that if there was a mistaken ruling on the part of the Kohen Gadol and he violated a Zdono Kares, how do you know that it's got to be a Zdono Kares situation? And the Gemara answers the Chsiv Mashiach. It says in the parish of Kohen Mashiach, again in Vayikra Daled, and I'll read the whole pasuk. It says, "Im hakohen hamashiach yecheta leashmas ha'am ve'kriv al chataso." And we're going to emphasize these two words: leashmas ha'am. Arei mashiach kitzibur. This pasuk, these words in the pasuk, are coming to equate Mashiach, Kohen Mashiach, with tzibur. That's called ha'am. And just like in the case of a parallel in Dovashal Tzibur, it's got to be a Dovashal Dono Kares, which we derive from the Gzeirah Shav Lel. So too, by way of analogy, the same requirement applies to a Kohen Mashiach. So the Kohen Mashiach who brings a Seira for a Chatas, when he violates a Losaseh based on a mistaken Hora, that only applies if the losaseh fits that category of Zdono Kares. Now the Gemara wants to give a source for a chatas yachid or for a chatas nasi. Yachid v'nasi. How do we know that we require that the lav be a lav of davar shes dono kares? Otherwise, there's no chiyuv chatas. Asya, we have exeris shalom mitzvos. With regard to a chatas yachid, the Torah says vayikra dalid. The nefesh achas techta bishkaga me'ama oretz basal so achas mitzvos Hashem asher lo se asen of Hashem, and then the Torah says he's got to bring a chat. So the word here is mitzvos. In Nasi, in the same parsha, it says v'yasa achas mikol mitzvos Hashem. In parallel in David Shel Tzibur, it says v'yasu achas mikol mitzvos Hashem. So now we have Xer Shavah. Just like in the case of mitzvos, in parallel in Davar Shel Tzibur, it's only Zdono Kares, so too mitzvos in the case of a Yachid and mitzvos in the case of a Nasi would only apply if it's Zdono Kares. Now the Gemara wants to know about a Chatas Tzibur Shel Avodas Kochavim. How do we know that it's only if it's Zdono Kares? Because in Avodas Kochavim, there are various kinds of violations. Some are like capital crimes, and others are just lava. So, for example, if you create an idol, or perhaps if you sell an idol. So the Gemara says that in the Brisa, we already saw this Brisa. It says below, we don't bring, or the tzibur doesn't bring what's called a par and a soyer. Remember, we had a paraliola and a soil of chatos. And the Gemara says that this din of par v'soyer of a tzibur that worship avodas kochavim, how do we know it's got to be a davar chayov maleh kares b'mezid? If we derive it from me'ene, another gzeir sham. In the parsha par helim davar shel tzibur, which applies to all mitzvahs. I'm not talking about avodas kochavim particularly. It says v'nelem davar me'ene akol. Now, in the case of avodas kochavim, which is again the parallel ola and the soil of chatos, now in Parsha Shlach, the Torah says v'aya im me'ene ha'eda. Again, the word me'ene nesto l'shkag v'yasu kol ha'eda par v'chule. So just like par chatos. So kol mitzvahs, meaning the general chiyuv of parhelam davar shel tzibur for any mitzvah, any losasa, is only if the losasa generates kares b'mezid. So too the par liola and sar lechatas of avodas kochavim only applies to a davar sheyesh bo kares. The Gemara now continues to bring a source that even a chatas yachid nazir, Nasi or Mashiach, if it's a violation of avodas kochavim, once again we require davar shes dono kares. Yachid, Nasi, uMashiach, and any of the above violated avodas kochavim. Again, we said that avodas kochavim has different categories, subcategories. So how do we know that we require for avodas kochavim, in the case not of a tzibur, but of a yachid, or a nasi, or a Mashiach? It's got to be a davar sheyesh bo bizdono kares. We derive it from the nefesh achas techeta bishkaga. Okay, fine. Nefesh achas techeta bishkaga. That seems like an innocuous possible. All of the above are included under nefesh achas. That's the phrase nefesh achas used by the Torah is indicative of a generic category of any yachid, whether he's a rank and file citizen, whether he's a nasi, whether he's a Mashiach. They all have the same carbon. But there's an extra vav, ve'im nefesh. And now we apply the principle of vav mosif al inyan rishon, that when you have a parsha that opens up with vav, the vav indicates that it's an addition and it's connected to something that came in the previous parsha. And in the very previous parsha, the Torah addresses the case of Shigas Avodah Zorah Shalat Tzibur. And now with the Vav, the Torah is connecting the Tzibur with the Yachid. The Yilmad Tachton Mina Elyon. Let the second parsha be derived from the previous parsha through the Vav. And therefore the Shkaga of a Yachid Nasi Mashiach now is going to be derived from the case of the Tzibur that came right before it in the Seder HaMikros. And just like in the case of a Tzibur, we do not bring a paraliola or sar lechatos unless it was a violation of kares, as we derived it earlier from the Gzeir Shava me'ene, so to a Yachid, in a case of a regular Yachid or a Nasi or a Mashiach, they do not bring their korban, which is called the Se'ira, unless it's a Davar Shechayoven al Zdono Kares. Now keep in mind that the Rabbanan of Rebbe used the word Oleh to exclude a Tzaras Erva from Yibam. How then can we use that same word Oleh to derive through Gzeira Shava, Oleh, that a Chatos could only be brought on a Davar Shezdano Kares? You can't use the word Oleh for two different dinim. Either use it for halachas of korbanos in terms of shogeg, or use it for tzaras erva. But if the chachamim are committed to derive tzaras erva from oleh, we no longer have oleh free for Gzeirat Shava to teach me that the chatos has to be from his davar zdono kares. And that's a kash on the Rabban. Rabbanon High Svara, right? That Har Helim Dovashal Tzibur and all other chatos requires Stone Kos Minolav. According to them, since we need a Oleh to derive Tzaras Sota, the Ptur of Tzaras Sota from Yibam, we don't have it free to darshan the Gzeirat Shava. And the Gemara now is going to have to offer an alternative derivation for chatos. So that's where we're gonna put this down now here, and we're gonna go back to what we started yesterday. So now, if you have, and I know some of you have the photocopy, it's page Samach Vav in the Yalkut HaBiurim, and we're on the left column. The Rambam writes, V'lakcha lo li'isha prat li'erva she'ein lo likuchen. So the Rambam in the 6th parak of Hilchas Yibum derives the exclusion of an erva from Yibum from the pasuk v'lakcha. That was, if you recall, Rebbe's drasha. Eitzad, says the Rambam, Yivavashi erva al Yivama, which means there's a mapik hey in the second Yivama, so it means Yivama she erva al Yavam shela kigam shahoisachos ishto o ima o bita harei zup turben achalitzu ben ayibum the ein lo aleh zika klal shenemar v'lakcha lo liisha v'yidma misha reuya l'lekuchen v'kiddushin tovsin ba he's kuka liyavam. But in the case of an erva, where ein kiddushin tovsin ba, she's not kuka liyavam, and all this the Rambam derives from the possible akha lo liisha v'yidma, and it means the Rambam is reflecting the sheet of Rebbe. Now Rav, if you remember, said that an erva doesn't need a pasuk at all, because Rav was assuming that ein esei dochalos sheish bo karetz. The drasha of Rebbe, well, Dorish Rebbe kosuv zeh, meaning mikra zeh, el k'dei liftar es hatzara, or to teach that Yibum is bal karcha. So why does the Rambam, if he assumes like Rebbe, require a drasha, a yalfusa, for that which we know logically even without a drasha? So far we only have one approach, and that is that even though you could derive it from Svara, since the Gemara had quoted Rebbe as deriving it from a pasuk, from a drasha, therefore the Rama mentions the drasha. And the key words here are Kevan Chekenu Pashtus Divrei Abrais. Again, irrationally, this is not so satisfying, but that's what he says. Now, there's no nafkamina whether it's derived from a drasha or a svara, so we don't have to get nervous about the Rambam, even though the maskana of Rav is that you don't need a drasha, so the Rambam quotes the drasha. Shayam shel Shlomo, right? This is the Marshal. If the Maggid Mishnah is correct, and the Rambam only wants to quote the Brisa, and he simply copies the lashon of the Brisa, right, where the Gemara quotes a Brisa that derives the conclusion that there's no yibum in the case of an erva from the pasuk oleh. Yet the Rambam quotes the pasuk v'lakcha. The aflachitas Rebbe lo nemra drasha b'signon shekasav Rambam el liftar es hatzara. The only reason why Rebbe quotes this drasha is for the purpose of tzara. And then he has the second drasha, the Yibma, to allow for Yibum Bal Karch. Mishum shekol she'ena tamiyabim esu, ena tamiyabim es hashniya. Because Rebbe understood that the entire mitzvah of Yibum is contingent on the fact that you have a choice and you can marry any of these two wives of your late brother. But not so in the case of an erva. Avala erva atzma behechrech eina p'tura ela mishum sheish ba karetz. The od hikcha lo darash Rebbe p'tur tzara mi litzar mishum tesavik Reb Shimon shel litzar nidrash l'drash acheres, right, that he can remarry his Yevama if he divorces her. One second. What was the case? Brothers married two, and therefore she falls to Yibum. She's achos. And the pasuk litzar is going to teach me that there's no yibum in the case of the tsar. Oh no! I'm sorry. This is the case of achosiku kosam. You remember this case? So Ruvain marries Rachel, and Shimon marries Leah, her sister. Immediately when Shimon dies, then as far as Levi is concerned, each one of the two sisters is a skuka, and therefore the other sister is achos skukasa. Do you remember that? Okay. Well, Rambam also like the Loker of Shimon. He never accepted this halacha of a p'tur yibum, an exclusion of yibum because of achos zkukaso. Ela kechacham ulshitaso behechrek she litzar right? Because it's only Reb Shimon who uses litzar to exclude the case v'achos kukaso, but the Chacham never accepted that drasha, so they're going to use litzar to exclude the tzar's erva. So why didn't the Rambam quote the pasuk litzar? That was the kasha of the Yam Shel Shlom. Or Chlaner Kasav Sharambam Sover the Lo Kirava El Kistama de Gemara. So Lulei Kra Haisa Erva Misyabev Shim Shayilana Lakisha Le'eshes Akshu Hutraliyim. You remember we had a question on how to learn the Hekesh, in which direction we go. In the case of the Hekesh of all Arayos, should we take Achos Ishto and exclude Yibum in all the Arayos, or should we take Eshes Ach and allow Yibum in all the cases? So the Rambam holds that if you only have the pasuk of Litzar, we wouldn't have known in which way to make the Hekesh, and therefore we need the pasuk of Lakha to exclude Eitzaris error. Eliach Laner apparently has another kash. Are mavur b'gemara sheshtei adroshos l'chavi yidma achas me'en bo lesser tzara achas la'atira shelo b'makom mitzvah. Take another peek at that. Just fresh out memory. Ches Omer Aleph. Ainly Elohim Idi ve'idi. So this is almost at the bottom of Daf Ches Amud Aleph. How many lines up from the bottom? Tosi Dimaskel Ki on Ches Amud Aleph Ki next to the last Tosus. Yes, no, maybe. So if you draw a straight line from the word Ki, you'll see one line down, perhaps Idi ve'idi. And we're using V'lakcha v'yidma. Those were the two extra hates. Litzar. And they both come to exclude Tzara from Yibum. So why do I need to exclude it? Chad lemesar Tzara b'makom mitzvah. V'chad lemishrei Tzara shelo b'makom mitzvah. So in other words, shelo b'makom mitzvah means it's not that the Erva and her Tzara were married to his brother. The Erva and Tzara were married to an Ish Zar. Right? Somebody married my sister and he married another woman. So I'm allowed to marry that other woman if he dies or divorces her. I don't have to worry about the fact that she was a Tzara to my sister. Because Tzaras Erva is only halacha in Yibum. It's not a general halacha, and that we derive from the pasuk v'yidma. L'fia Rambam and Dorish Josha Achas le'isur ha'erva atzma. The Rambam has one drasha, which he needs for the erva, and the Rambam derived that from the pasuk v'lakcha. So we're left with only one other pasuk, the Yidma. Is chaser lanu drasha achas lahatir tzara shalom b'makom mitzvah. The Gemara says we had two drashos, and the second drasha was going to teach us the case of tzara shalom b'makom mitzvah. But the Rambam doesn't have that luxury; he doesn't have that option. Because the Rambam needs one pasuk for erva, and the other pasuk for tzaras erva. He can't use it for tzaras erva shalom b'makom mitzvah. Shlomar she'af l'shitas Rambam darshina. miyivma lahatit tzara shalom makom mitzvah. Now wait a second. How does the Aruch LaNer pull this trick off? How can you use the Yidma for tzara shalom mikvah? I mean, I need the possible Yidma to teach me the case of Shtei Achios. Or let's say it the other way around. If a lakcha, according to the Rambam, excludes an erva, because he doesn't have that option, then the Yidma is coming to exclude a tzaras erva, according to the Rambam. How can he derive from this pasuk then shalom b'makom mitzvah? I mean, tzaras erva shalom b'makom mitzvah. I don't get it. We need the Yidma to exclude a tzaras erva. Akias Isra tzara b'makom mitzvah dorish around makom acher. Yimavur behemshech. Shem she'erva poteres min ha'olitza v'nayim kach tzarasa t'ura. Lo nafla lo zika al bayis zek chlal shenemer asher lo bona asher lo yivne es bayis echa bayis sheyesh lo likuchin v'yezu et sheyirtze hu sheyesh lo zika bayis shemiktzos ein yichol livnos haresha ein lo bo likuchin v'eino bona afilu miktzas shahayimut. Let's just calculate. According to the Aruch LaNer, we have the lakha. That's going to exclude what? An erva. That's going to exclude an erva. Ain't ball right? Because in erva there's no thesis kiddush. That the Rambam excludes erva from the lakha. So the Aruch LaNer is introducing another pasuk from which we're going to derive the conclusion that you need that the entire bias fall for Yibum. It's got to be a zika for the entire bias as an entity. But bias shemikitzaso eno yochel livnoso is ein bo lekuch. So in other words, we start with the pasuk v'lokcha. That's going to exclude erva. How do you exclude saras erva? Now you have to introduce another pasuk, and that pasuk is going to shed a new light on v'lokcha. And it's going to tell you that if you don't have v'lokcha because she's an erva, and the exclusion of an erva is from the extra hey in the word v'lokcha, then there's no deal at all as far as this bias. The entire bias is excluded. There's no v'lokcha at all from this bias, even as far as the tzara is concerned. Because Mamela says the Aruch LaNer, the Rambam now has another pasuk that's free, and that's v'yibma. And the pasuk v'yibma is coming to be b'mayit a tzaras erva shalom b'makom mitzvah. How do I exclude a tzaras erva? That's from the pasuk v'lakcha, but only after bias. On what's the pasuk? Asher lo yivne is base achiv. So the Asher lo yivne is base aviv tells me base achiv tells me that in the case of an erva, not only is the erva herself excluded from Yibum, but even the tzara and why is the tzara excluded? Because of the pasuk yivne. Mela, the Yidma is free to tell you Tzaras Erva Shalom. Now he quotes Rabbi Nachman. Before the Gemara, the Af LeRebbe Tzarech Kra Lahatir Tzarech Erva Shalom B'Makom Mitzvah. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what the chiddush of that is. Why would Rebbe think otherwise? But in any event, a Rambam Hevi didn't say Tzar Shalom Makom Mitzvah Muteres Shalom Makom Yivu. Lo Hevi Lezeh Shum Makar. So it's not like the Aruch LaNer who says that the Rambam derived it from the Yidma. Halacha Yud Beis. We see Halacha Yud Beis. Let's see, before we were looking at no, we were not looking at Halacha Yud Beis. Would I be able to trouble you for that we open up the Rambam? That would be Nashim, which is I think on the other side of this wall. Thank you so much. Pardon. So remind me, Jeff, maybe if you can, that we're looking at Perek Vav, Halacha Yud Beis. Can you make a mental note of that, or right? Okay. So apparently, the Rambam doesn't have a pasuk for Tzaras Erva Shalom Makom Mitzvah. That's what we'll see hopefully inside. Vav Yud Beis, Hilchos Yibum. Is there such a thing? I say Yevama Erval Baila, you go and show of our the Lokach Osome Aviv Noflifne Achiv Einzu Ishto Ein Kiddushin Tovs. I don't see it. Perik Vov Alachi Beis. Find the wrong Perik. All right, so I haven't found it. Well, we'll give Reb Nachum the benefit of the doubt. He says, "Yishem she'avius makoro shel Rebbe me'etzem isud tzor." Because of Yashiv, she'rak ledas rov tzorich pasuk la'atira. Now, if I understand what he means by latira, he's talking about a tzaras erev b'shalom b'makom mitzvah. Aval das hamakshon madu etzarich l'Rebbe Yishnei psukim. He holds an ein tzarich kra lahatir tzaras shalom b'makom mitzvah. And what's the longest? He says din sara eno isur el ptur miyavam. Umemela pshita she'ein din sara noeg el b'makom mitzvah. Aval rava savale she'erva oseres es sarasa yalkein lule divrei lule ribui akotzav havamina sha'af shalom b'makom mitzvah hi asur. So what's the halacha of tzaras erva? Is it ptur, or is the halacha that the erva generates an isra on the tzara? And that's going to be a machlok between the Makshon and Rava. Rava holds that the erva, the Makshon holds that the erva is now generating a ptur yibum on the tzaras erva, whereas Rava holds that the erva generates an isra on the tzara. It's not a ptur yibum, but rather it's an isra on the tzara. Now, according to Rava, if it's an isra on the tzara, maybe it would apply even shalom b'makom mitzvah. The Makshon held it was just a ptur from the mitzvah of yibum, based on the fact that she's a tzaras erva. So according to the Makshon, we would have no havamina that this halacha of tzaras erva would have any application outside of the framework of the mitzvah of yibum, shalom b'makom mitzvah. But according to Rava, who holds that the erva generates an isra on the tzara, therefore I might think that that could apply even shalom b'makom mitzvah. Uvepashlis nirami divrei Rambam she'erva gufa tzricha krov v'imkein yesh lomar shu sover kisvaras hamakshon she'ein tzara kro lahatir tzaras erva shalom b'makom mitzvah. So the Rambam held like the svara of the Makshon that Tzaras Erva is a ptur of Yibum. It has no application outside the framework of Yibum. Whereas Rava needs a pasuk to be matir Tzaras Erva Shalom Makom Mitzvah, because Rava holds that the status of Erva is now contagiously impacted on the Tzara, and that could apply even Shalom Makom Mitzvah. But the Rambam never accepted that. He adopted the position of the Makshon, and therefore Pshita, it's certainly true without a doubt, and I don't need a pasuk for this, that the din of Tzara only applies to Makom Mitzvah. Very nice. He says, La'or Zeh Yisyashev. You have the place, by the way, I'm on Samach Zayin. Uli'or Zeh Yisyashev Mashalo Hiskir Arama B'Vtur Erev Tzarasa Michalitza. Ram doesn't even bother mentioning that there's no chalitza in these cases. Shehu mishum haklal shekol she'eino ol yibum eino ol chalitza. Hani mishum shemeyachar sheyesh bi erva p'tur miyibum ye'eino iser bilvad. Shita sha'af eino ola l'chalitza shekein ein bo zika klal. Fila Rambam Kol liman amuva lahalon mi'im lo yachpotz ish lakachto. Shemimeno yalfinon ha im chafetz miyavim. Aval kol she'ino bechlal. What's the next word here? Lakachas. Lakachta. Right? It says in lo yachpotza ish likachta, which excludes an error. Is ena ol chalitza. You derive it from this pasuk. Eno el chacham adarchin din erva miyibum me'olel shalishitasam ein ze el iser v'lo ptur. That's why there was a even shalom b'makom mitzvah. Is al kain tzarech es hadrosha nal k'dei lefotra af michalitza v'lashitas Rebbe asover shemakar ptur erva miyibum hu mi parshas yibum atzma ein ze iser el ptur v'al kain lo tzarech es hadrosha amura k'dei lefotra michalitza. Right, because we have a principle that if you're potter from Yibum, you're potter from Chalitza. So which sheet actually needs a special drasha to exclude an erva or a tzaras erva from Chalitza? That's only the Chachamim, because they derive the din of erva from Olel, which is a din of Isur. So it's a din of Isur. It means that the mitzvah Yibum really lurks in the shadows. He cannot fulfill the mitzvah because there's an Isur that we derive from Olel. But as far as Chalitza is concerned, she definitely would require Chalitza. The Rambam never accepted that because he accepted Rebbe's sheet, as we saw in the Rambam. And the source for the Ptur of Erev of Yibum is the Parsha of Yibum itself. That's a complete ptur. And if it's a complete ptur, there's no zika, there's no nefila, there's no requirement of chalitza. Picture at Tosfos l'chol osam tirutzim hasovrim sha'af erva atzma tzricha kol yosra b'yibum. Meaning, if we don't accept Rava was the one who said that I know logically that there's no yibum in an erva, but according to all the other shitos, even in the case of an erva, we're not sure that she's exempt from yibum, and we need a pasuk liosra. Minayim lanu shetzaras erva shalom b'makom mitzvah muteres. How do we know that it's tzaras erva shalom b'makom mitzvah muteres? Right? We can't use the word olea as a mute for tzaras erva shalom b'makom mitzvah, because we need the word olea to derive tzaras erva, to derive erva. I mean, we don't have Rabba's svara that an erva is excluded from yibum because ein esei dochalosas, etc. Itirtzu sheyidrushu din zeme heichan shedarsha Rebbe dainu miyavama. So from the word v'yibma, we're going to exclude a tzaras erva shalom b'makom mitzvah. Now the Gemara says, "V'lav kal v'chomer b'makom mitzvah asira shalom b'makom mitzvah sharia." How can we be matir tzaras erva shalom b'makom mitzvah if she's asura b'makom mitzvah. I mean, there's more of a reason to be matir in the case of makom mitzvah. Hiksha marsha. This on the left column. Halo yesh lifra kavachomer zeh. This kavachomer is vulnerable to a pircha. She came b'makom mitzvah yeshnam shnei isurei erva. Gam ervas achos isha, v'gam ervas eshes ach. Mishum kach asr Torah mishum shtehen, amal shalom b'makom mitzvah, she'ein sham shem erva, ela shem erva echad, shelo asra Torah. You're telling me that for sure it's going to be asura shalom b'makom mitzvah because you don't have a mitzvah to be doche. On the contrary, you don't have the lav and the erva of Eshes ach because she's married to another fellow, not my brother. So there's only one Isur Erva. Yeah, but I would say that we're not counting Isur Erva. I mean, what difference whether it's one or two? He says, "V'tiritz al pi divrei Tosus liel shalom atzinu b'shum makom chiluk bein chumra shnei Isur l'chomer Isur echad al kein Isur echad shalom makom mitzvah chomer v'osa mida shel shnei Isurim." All right, I think that's more or less what we say. Od hiksha, another kasha the marsha shoya lo gemara lasos esakal b'chomim eshes ach male iser eshes ach dehutar b'makom mitzvah. So shalom makom mitzvah is Shana writes. Ooh, wow. That's pretty fun. You hear this? This is like a chess game. It's saying the following. In the case of Eshes Ach, the Torah is matirit b'makom mitzvah. The Torah is not matir Eshes Ach shalom b'makom mitzvah. In the other arayos, you don't even have a head to b'makom mitzvah. So how much more so you shouldn't have a head to shalom b'makom mitzvah? Al kal v'chomer zelo nuchal lahoshiv Sarah tochiach sharei ein ikar kal v'chomer b'makom mitzvah el meishes ach al af kulaso hu asu shalom b'makom mitzvah val zeh ein shum pircha mitzara. Let's just make a note of where we got up to here. By Sunday, I'm not going to remember. We're here on Daf Samach Zayin. And we're up to Tzara Tochia. This is where we move over to Daf Ches Omid Beis. Again, in the learning of the Gemara itself, let's not forget that we're already on Daf Tes. Am I correct? Make sure that is the case. Second, where do we get to? I don't have the place anymore. Oh, so we're on Daf Tes Amid Aleph, and we're up to Nafkalahu. Am I right? Nafkalahu. And we're up to Rabbi Yeshua. This is going to be a separate drasha to teach us again that in chatos you need a zdono curries. Okay, then. So that's what we'll pick it up on Sunday. So I wish everyone a great weekend, and this is opportunity that we're having in our family to go away with that.